we don't have to get that cozy. I don't know what it is about this pregnancy, but I'm sneezing way more than I usually do. Hello lovelies, I'm Christina, and today I'm giving you my May wrap-up. So for the month of May, I read 1 graphic novel and 4 books, and I listened to 1 audiobook. Let's jump into it. So the first read of the month of May was a graphic novel, and that was Death Note Volume 1 by Tsugumi Ohba. Probably saying that wrong. And the art is by Takeshi Obata. I've heard so many things about Death Note. I have not seen the series, and I've had this on the list of graphic novels I've wanted to read for a really long time. It just sounds so dark and wonderful, and I kind of knew that I would like it before I went into it. If you don't know, it is a story about a boy named Light who finds this notebook, and if he writes down a name of someone that he can picture in this notebook, that person dies of a heart attack unless he specifically writes down how they are going to die. So he can write down the name, I think it's the time as well, and the date, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so this is, it says contains volumes 1 and 2. This is the black edition. Brilliant story. Really like the artwork. There are a few things here that I would have just loved to get to know more about, and I'm thinking that will happen in the next volumes, because I will definitely continue on with this series. I just really liked how dark and different it is. The art form is all in black and white, beautiful nonetheless, and I'm really excited to continue on with this series. Although I found it to be really interesting and really intriguing, I didn't feel like extremely connected to any other characters. I think that's why it ended up being a 4-star instead of a 5-star experience for me. But I am really excited to find out what happens next. The next one is Old Man's War by John Scalzi. I've fallen in love with Scalzi's writing. I think the first book that I read by him was Lock-In. I listened to that on Audible, and I was just amazed at how brilliantly he writes sci-fi. So I came across this while I was book browsing with Alex when he came to visit here in December, and I just stumbled upon this one, which is quite a short little book. It's about John Perry. He is, how old is he? 70 something? Yes, 75 years old. And he has lost his wife, and he signs up to go join the army. The army then produces a new body for him. They take his DNA and they make a new and improved version of him and sends him off to war. And so he signs this contract that he has to stay in service for, I think it's 10 years, if he can survive that long. Usually they don't. So it's just a story of him joining this army and what happens and what he experiences. This is the first book in the series. Really loved it. It's super funny, even though it's dark and filled with war and violence. But it has these really funny moments, and the dialogue is just brilliant. I really like this. I have ordered book 2 and 3 in the series, so I'm extremely interested to see what happens next. I absolutely love this, ended up giving it 5 stars. Next one is a chunker. I've had this on my shelf for a really, really, really long time. I'm not even sure for how long. I think it's been years. I've found it to be extremely intimidating because it is a chunker. But from time to time I ask my son Leander to pick out a random read from the bookshelf, and he usually always goes for the biggest books he can find because he thinks that's hilarious. And it's a good way for me to just end up reading the books that I keep putting off because I find them intimidating. So he did the exact same thing this time around, and he went for Night Film by Marisha Pessl. I remember this going around BookTube quite a few years ago, and I picked it up. I was super excited about it, and then I just never read it. Now I have. It is a story of Scott McGrath, who is an investigative journalist, and the death of Ashley Cordova. Ashley is the daughter of a famous horror movie director. I don't remember his first name. Is it Stanislav Cordova? I think that's it. Something along that line. He makes these really mysterious horror movies that can only be seen at private showings in sewers and dark alleys, and there's just so much mystery around Cordova and his movies. Reading about this made me wish that there actually was a real Cordova, so I could watch the movies because it sounded so interesting. But the thing that I found truly interesting about this book is the format, because it has these passages where there's websites, so you can watch them and look at them as if you were scrolling through the websites themselves. There are files. There's also conversations in text messages. So it's a very interesting format that I really enjoyed. It is a chunker. I did get through it pretty quickly though, because it's very thrilling. It is very mysterious how Scott McGrath and his little team of investigators tried to figure out if the death of Ashley Cordova was actually a suicide or not. What I will say about this is that the characters that I did feel really invested in were not the lead characters. The characters I found to be most interesting was Ashley and her father, which kind of makes sense because most of the mystery is surrounded around them. And when it comes to the ending, I didn't predict just how the story would end, but I kind of knew what sort of ending we would get, if that makes sense, and I'm not really sure how I feel about it. In one way, I think it makes perfect sense to let the book end the way that it did. On the other hand, I feel a little bit unsatisfied. I feel like there's still a lot of questions that I didn't get answers to. So that's why this one ended up being a 4.5 stars experience for me. Still really enjoyed it though. Still highly recommend. The next book that I read was Dawn of the Half-Angel by my good friend Alex Charles Ross. This is the sequel to Night of the Half-Angel. I will read you the back of this because I found it hard to explain what this is about without making it sound like it doesn't make sense. So Alex just does a better job at it. So it says, the city of Chicago has secrets that's been itching to claw its way out. Beneath the fading street lamps and through the shadowy alleyways are hidden terrors. Escaped demons from hell. Angels trying to uphold the balance, some without much regards of fatalities. And the occasional vengeful poltergeist. This is all old news to FBI agent Angela Nardi, the outcast and sole member of the Chicago FBI's Paranormal Division. Nardi always knew that her enhanced strength, the ability to create pure holy energy constructs, and bouncing back from the nastiest of wounds came from those damn tattoos, the very ones she was born with. Wings inked on her arms, back, and ankles. When a young boy's parents literally had the life sucked out of them by a biomechanical demon, Angela is thrown into a complex triangle against the demon, the young boy's ill-omened uncle, and a rogue archangel whose plans could land Nardi smack dab in the middle of a conflict that's gone on since before the Earth itself. So I loved this one. I'm slightly biased here though because Alex is one of my best friends and I love him and I love his writing, and so far I've just loved everything that he publishes. But yeah, really enjoyed this, so I was highly anticipating the sequel and it was even better. It's just so thrilling and exciting and at the edge of your seat, a page turner. I just highly recommend this if you like fantasy, paranormal, action-packed stories, and they're quite short as well. I wish they were longer just because I want to know more, but yes, love these, love the second book, gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Next up is the audiobook that I listened to, and that was the Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming by David Wallace-Wells. This is a non-fiction book about what warming does to our world, and kind of what we're looking at going into the future, depending on how many degrees our planet keeps rising. It is horrifying, it's scary, but it's so extremely important. I think that this book should be on the list of books that should be read in school, just because it puts things into perspective. I think this is a must-read for anyone. It just makes you think, and even though it is very saddening and scary to read this book, I think we need to. It just gives us a lot of knowledge about what has happened so far to our Earth and what we are looking at and what we have to do to try to prevent the worst case scenarios. I end up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. Now, the last book that I read in the month of May was also a chunker, so apparently I'm into chunky books nowadays, but that was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, the first book in the Crescent City series. I've really enjoyed Sarah J. Maas's writing in her other series. Throne of Glass is just brilliant. I really enjoyed A Court of Thorns and Roses, although I haven't continued on with that series yet, but I will. I was anticipating this just because I was curious to see how Sarah J. Maas would write for a more adult audience, because the other books are more young adult. I know this might be an unpopular opinion here, because I feel like everyone on BookTube just absolutely loved this. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. It took a little while getting into this for all the world building to make sense for me. I didn't feel truly invested in Bryce and Hunt as characters, although I found them to be interesting. And I felt like all of the sexual tension in this book, it just felt a little bit forced. It felt like she had added an extreme amount of sexual tension in this book just for the sake of having a lot of sexual tension, if that makes sense. And it's not that I don't like steamy books, you know that, but in some way it just didn't feel natural and it felt a bit forced. So, interesting premise. And I'm very curious to see where this story goes. And one of the things that I think that Sarah J. Maas does so well is write strong female characters that are not in any ways perfect, and she builds these really interesting, intricate worlds with interesting elements of magic in them. She has done the same in this one, found that to be extremely well done, except that it took me a little while to not feel confused because there's so many characters and so many things going on, and I think in the back of my mind I kept comparing this to Throne of Glass, which is unfair to the book itself, but I just couldn't help it. So yeah, I enjoyed it, didn't love it, will probably continue on with the next book. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So there you have it. Those are the books that I read in the month of May. I will link all of them in the description box down below. Let me know what you've been reading lately. As always, I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hit that subscribe button and that bell button if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video soon. Goodbye!